So good morning, everyone. My name is Ernest, as already introduced by Amrish. I work for Afrinic. The title of this morning's chat, IPv4 Space Advances from Brokers, what you need to know. So I believe most of us here are network operators, and this topic in front of you would not be new to us. I wish there could have been much more of us. Yesterday were much more, but I believe either due to the party or the SAFNOG, I see the numbers are much less. But nevertheless, I hope this will be useful. A little bit of how this topic came up. So one of us, actually, in this room, a couple of weeks back, I received an email from somebody offering to lease them /16. And that person approached Afrinic and a few of us and asked us, guys, what do you think of this? So after some exchanges with a few things to look out for, what to do, what not to do, the gentleman advised, you know what, I guess this is something you could talk about at AFNOG. Maybe it might benefit somebody else. So most of what is here is what we actually shared with that person, who I won't mention. Okay, so a bit of the genesis of why this is all happening, why are brokers coming to folks out there trying to advance V4 space to them. Well, first of all, we are all aware that IPv4 address space is running out or is getting depleted. If anybody is not aware of that, I wonder where you've been, but I hope that all of us are aware of this. As a matter of fact, the IANA, or now called the PTI, which used to distribute IPv4 space in blocks of /8 to the registries, ran out of those /8s way back in 2011. And this was announced to the whole world. The last /8 was distributed, in fact, the last 5 /8 blocks were distributed 1 /8 to each RIR back in 2011. However, as we speak now, the inventory at some of the registries, especially ARIN, is completely zero. Zero. The American Registry for Internet Numbers has 0 space in their inventory, apart from some little chunks that are returned once in a while by those that don't need it under their policies. APNIC and LACNIC, their inventories are running near empty, as I'll show you further ahead. And RIPE NCC and Afrinic, our projected run-out dates are also quite soon, but some people think it's not that soon because of a few ways in which we're distributing V4 space. For example, I will share further ahead with you that at some point in our run-out phase, the maximum values of space that we shall be giving out shall change to smaller blocks. And some people think those smaller blocks might take a very long time to run out. But again, this all depends. So right in front of you, you can see what is actually left. This graphic, I picked it from the NRO joint stats, but the numbers I picked from Geoff Houston's very useful website, portaro.net. He has live numbers of what each registry has left in /8s. As you can see, Afrinic has about 45% of a /8 left right now. APNIC has about 26% of a /8 left. ARIN, 0. LACNIC, 11% of a /8. And RIPE NCC, 44% of a /8. These are very small numbers compared to actually what the world needs out there to be able to run their networks. These are very, very tiny. Now, at Afrinic, we are in this phase of our cycle, our distribution cycle called the exhaustion phase. This is well defined in our policies. And during this exhaustion phase, there are restrictions on how much space one can actually acquire. And each registry has its different restrictions. Now, in our soft landing phase that we are currently distributing space under, right now, you can acquire up to a maximum of a /13 right now, no more. So if you want a /11, a /10, we can only give you a /13 as the maximum. Now, in the other registries, RN, RIPE, NCC, and EPINIC, there is a mechanism. They also have their restrictions too, but there is a mechanism for them to be able to exchange space amongst themselves through transfers. At Afrinic, we only have a process for internal transfers, which I'll talk about a bit later. Now, the consumption rates in Africa have been, as you can see, for the last 5 years, in 2014, about 6 million, about 7 million addresses were given out. 2015, about 12 million. 2016, about 4/8 nearly. 2017, about 12 million. And 2018, so far, about 8 million. Now, on average, this is about 11 million IP addresses over the last 5 years. Now, again, I picked this graphic from Jeff Houston's informational site on IPv4 address space called portaro.net. You can see the projected run-out dates for all the registries according to Jeff Houston's algorithms. Now, Afrinic is in green, and you can see that the green line, which he has tried to plot to extrapolate from that descending green curve graph, roughly shows that towards the end of 2019, our inventory might be running out, according to Jeff Houston. And is not far off. His numbers, his projections are not far off from what is actually happening, looking at our consumption rates and what is left in our inventory. Now, as mentioned before, in this execution phase 1, we can give you a maximum of a /13 if the need for it can be justified. In fact, that's very important. Whatever is given out must be justified. You must demonstrate that you need it. Now, when our inventory hits a /11, when only a /11 of space is left, which is about 13% of a /8, then we shall enter exhaustion phase 2, where the maximum will be a /22. Now, we are currently at 45% of a /8, and we think that towards the end of 2019, most likely we shall be hitting phase 2 with a /11 left. So at the end of this year, or maybe early next year, you will only be able to get up to a /22 as a maximum, only. Now, because of all this, it is probably why there's all this frenzy about V4 space running out, okay? And the consequent actions. Now, although we don't have any evidence, this is all speculation, but based on trends and what we have observed, it may be possible, it may happen that some organizations could come to us to request large amounts of space with needs that they may demonstrate to us, but then later go ahead and advance some of the space they have gotten from us to other companies for rent or for lease or for sale. Now, it is possible that some of these entities may actually be advancing space to you, which space is from outside Afrinic. But this is a bit unlikely because the space outside Afrinic is already in the different transfer markets outside there, and it's quite expensive. So it is a bit unlikely that whoever has space from outside the region will be bringing it to sell it or lease it here. But again, it may be possible. Now, what do we think? Number one, just to make it very clear, if you need V4 space right now, you can still get it from us, at least up to /13, where at least until we hit exhaustion phase 2, where the restrictions will be /22. But right now, you can get up to /13 if you can demonstrate to us that you need it. So if a broker comes to you with a /16 and say, hey, space is running out, blah, 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 have this space. No, you don't have to panic. You know that we can still give that space to you. But you must demonstrate that you need it. However, if you cannot demonstrate that you need it, or maybe you don't need it now and you need it further, ahead of time to keep it, which means you cannot demonstrate to us at the moment that you need it now, or if your requirements are beyond a /13, or if you feel you must actually engage whoever has offered you the space, then you have some options. Number one, we have a policy provision for intra-Afrinic transfers. What does this mean? Section 5.7 of our Consolidated Policy Manual allows for IPv4 address transfers between address space holders in the Afrinic service region. So you could exchange your space with somebody else under the current policies. However, there is a clause just right there in red that still applies. So this clause stipulates that the transfer recipient must demonstrate to Afrinic the need for the IP addresses to be transferred to that recipient. So I mentioned earlier that you can get a /13 under current policies if you demonstrate that you need it. However, if you want to run to the transfer market, you still need to be aware that if you're to receive the space from whoever wants to transfer it to you, you still must demonstrate that you need it. If you cannot demonstrate that you need it, Afrinic will not be able to approve that transfer, unfortunately. So this is something that you need to be aware of. However, it is an option. If you somehow you cannot get space from us, as explained before, yes, transfers are an option, but unfortunately for you, or fortunately, you still need to be able to demonstrate to us that you need that space. Otherwise, if you fail to demonstrate the need for it, we cannot in any way approve the transfer. And of course, other information you need to know regarding transfers, the transfer must be initiated by the rightful holder of the space. In other words, you have to check to make sure that whoever wants to do the transfer is actually the rightful owner of that V4 space. Now, legacy resource holders, who are these? These are organizations that received their space way before the registries came into place. So legacy resource holders too, if you have space, a legacy resource holder, you need to know that you can also transfer your space. However, once you do it, it ceases to be legacy space. Nisha, you can transfer your space, just your legacy space holder, right? So after a successful transfer, the transferor cannot request space within 12 months after the transfer. That's what the policy says. And again, to note that, yes, we do understand that once transfers happen, maybe behind closed doors, some money has changed hands, but normally that's none of Afrinic's business. So if maybe whoever gave you the space, you know, if you give space to somebody and they don't pay you, please don't come back to us after we've done the transfer. That, hey, please, we need the space back because I was not paid. Usually the money and all that is not something we're concerned with, as long as the policy requirements have been met. So that was the first part. Your options, number one, the transfer policy. Number two, renting or leasing. Now, renting or leasing, I believe it's something which is already happening. I've seen this on different forums, on different communities, people discussing about it. So it seems to be something that is already going on. However, this is what our members and community need to know about this. Now, legacy resource holders, these again are those organizations who got their space way before the registry system, before Afrinic came into place, before all the other RIRs came into place. The resources they hold, the V4 space they hold, the V4 blocks they hold are not bound by the Afrinic Registration Services Agreement or by policies, because they got these addresses way before. The addresses predate any of these policies, they predate, they haven't signed any agreement with that. So they can actually freely rent out their address space to anyone, anywhere, without any contingencies. Okay, so that's just for the record. You need to know that. However, regular members whose address space is bound by the Afrinic Registration Services Agreement and bound by policies, most of the cases not allowed to rent out space to other entities, because this will be in breach of the Registration Services Agreement and policies. And this is how. Article 4.c.I or .1 of the Registration Services Agreement reads that the applicant hereby irrevocably commits itself to using the services solely for the purpose for which it was requested. Now, most of the times, if a member who has gotten address space through the regular RSA and through regular policies is coming out to rent these addresses to you, in most cases, such a member has got the space to use within the infrastructure or to use within the, to assign to their customers who are normally connected to the infrastructure or who are consuming their services. Now, if such a member goes out of that realm to rent space to somebody else not connected to what they told us they were going to use the space for, then they actually are in breach of the same contract that they signed with us. So if you go out and rent that space and we have evidence of it, then we can revoke that member's contract, which means revoking and taking back the space that is attached to that contract. And you would suffer if you're renting space from such a member. The policy also, Article 5.5.1.11 of the Consolidated Policy Manual reads, assignments remain valid for as long as the original criteria on which the assignment was based are still in place, which is a bit related to what the RSA says. So if circumstances have changed, then those the assignments are no longer valid. If you requested space to use for purpose A and you're using it for purpose B, then most likely you're in breach. And purpose B could be something like renting. So just to summarize, the two options that you have, there's renting or leasing and through transfers, if you cannot get space ordinarily through us, through the current policy. Now, concluding remarks, if you're approached by an entity with offer for V4 space, most importantly, number one, we can still give you space. So you don't really need to rush to the brokers or to panic. Know that you can still get space from us. But for now, /13 maximum. Maybe after next year, /22. But you can still get space from us. However, if you must engage that party to establish if it's a transfer offer, if you must engage that party, you need to establish whether it is a transfer offer or an offer to lease. Now, depending on whether it is an offer to transfer or an offer to lease, then there are different methods to follow. In case of a transfer, the address space holder must be an AFRINIC member in good standing or an AFRINIC legacy resource holder. If you need more information, contact us and we can guide you. If it is an offer to rent or lease, well, for starters, most of the time, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, this whole presentation came because somebody was contacted about a lease offer of a /16. Now, most of the time, you will find that most of these brokers or people who have these huge amounts of space are not contacting just one person, but sending out broadcasts of spam to nearly everybody who cares to read or listen. So sometimes you don't have to react immediately to what you receive. So see whether it is actually a genuine spam. Sometimes even those people write to AFRINIC trying to lease space to us. You see, so most of the time this could be just spamming broadcasts. So you can choose to ignore them, but if you choose to pick some interest, then make sure that the space to be leased is not under a regular AFRINIC registration services agreement. Because if it is, most likely that space will be in breach of the AFRINIC registration services agreement and the policies in place. And you leasing it might be problematic in case AFRINIC discovers that it was in breach and takes it back from you, rather from whoever leased it to you. If the space is from a legacy resource holder, as I mentioned, a company that got it way before AFRINIC and the other registries were in place, then most likely you can go ahead and lease it safely. If the space is from out of region and you have concerns, we recommend that you contact the RIR that issued that space. Now, most of the time, the way to contact the RIRs is using the hostmaster email address, hostmaster at whichever RIR it is, .net. And if you really must consult AFRINIC, you can also write to us and we shall be happy to give you our feedback. But those are the options available. So again, to stress this, we have not run out of V4 space yet. Yes, there are restrictions on how much space you can get, but we have not run out. We still have V4 space to give out to our members and to companies in Africa. So you don't need right now to rush to brokers, this frenzy of exhaustion. We are still here with V4 space in our inventory, at least for some time. There are restrictions, but it is there. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions. Nishar.
Good morning. My name is Nishal Govardhan, concerned community member. So I've got a few questions while the line is building, as usual. My first question is, at your current allocation rates, what is your expected run-out time? I think there used to be a statistic on your website. I can't remember, but is there one now? And if so, offhand?
So I was going through these numbers actually with Alan earlier in the morning, and we think that the run-out projection that Jeff has indicated in his algorithms is actually pretty much what we think to be. So I indicated earlier that our average consumption rates are about 11 million IP addresses a month, and we currently have 45% of a /8. So if you do the math, you'll see that if everything remains constant, so about early 2019.
That's when you hit the start of phase 2.
That's when we shall hit phase 2.
2.
Yes,
right.
Phase 2. So that's when we shall have about a /11 left, which we shall be, we shall have restrictions in how much you can get from there. Only a /22.
Sorry.
Now, once we get to that, most folks think that giving out that many /22s from the /11 might take a longer period of time than anticipated, as is the case at RIPE and CC. Some folks have been saying it might take 10 years or plus, even more. Some think it might be much shorter. But right now, when we're giving out a /13 maximum, we might hit the /11 threshold at about the end of this year or early next year.
So,
yes.
So just again, for the folks on the stream, it's at current rates, you can get up to a /13 up until your projected date of
about late 2018 or early 2019.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that to be clear for the people that were listening. No one else, so I'll go on. Still Nishal. So in the intra-Afrinic member transfer policy, you make a very clear point of saying we're not interested in the money, right? Mm-hmm. And that's very cute. And I understand why you're doing it. But what are your responsibilities towards making sure that previous allocations that were made are not being abused to take care of this? So here's my direct question, right? When this policy came in, one of the authors of the policy was accused of not using the address space that they had been given for a period of time that was already contrary to the policy allocation. So in other words, if I give you space and you're not using it within a year, you're supposed to actually return it to Africa, right?
Just to correct you there.
You can do the correction when I'm done, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you can fill in the blanks. I don't remember the policies because I don't do this all the time. So I raised that question with Afrinic as well. I raised the ticket with Afrinic to say, this is a concern to me as a community member, that an author of a policy is proposing a policy and they have address space that they are not using, because I can see that clearly there's the opportunity for abuse. Now, whether it was done by the authors or not is not the point, and I'm using this as an example. Yeah. But what are you doing to make sure that people aren't stockpiling these addresses now so that they're just going to abuse the intra-Afrinic transfer policy, which is clearly an option for them right now?
Okay, so the correction I wanted to make, one, is that the V4 policies do not actually have any clause in there that require you to, well, maybe to rephrase, if you get space from us and do not announce it or do not use it, there is no specific part of the policy that requires you to return it. There was in the V6 policy, but not in the V4. I think that's what I wanted to correct you. Yes, I remember that a community member one time raised an issue with the author of that policy, one of the authors, about that particular issue, and the V4 policy does not explicitly require you to return space.
I was under the impression that, and sure I heard you mention it here,
Yeah.
was that if the reason that you requested the space no longer exists, then you have to return that to Afrinic. I might have heard you incorrectly.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I heard you incorrectly, or yes, you said it?
I think you had me correct, Anisha, but I said explicitly, it does not explicitly require you to return the space.
Does not explicitly.
Yes, explicitly required to. So it's not written or cast in stone that if you get space from us and do not use it, then you must return it. Well, however, yes, there are different ways in which space can be enriched. If, for example, I was talking in the specific case of leasing. If, for example, you got space from us and you said you're going to serve your VPN customers, all over Africa. And then we realize that you're serving VPN customers in the US and you're, routing this space out of, huge ISP in the US and serving customers in the US. Then it's a bit of a contravention. What you're using it for is not exactly what you told us you're going to use it for. Now, if you're not announcing it, the situation is a bit different. I can see a situation where you could tell us, yes, I've not yet announced it, but I'm going to use it for what I told you I was using it for. See, not announcing it is a bit of a different situation, and there's no time limit on which you should announce it. That was the case I think, with that particular issue. So not announcing it is a bit different because you cannot go after somebody who has not announced it because they could say, hey, I'm still preparing myself.
Yeah, but it doesn't take 4 years to plan, right?
Yes,
so what's the threshold? No, it doesn't. I've been a network engineer. If it takes you 4 years to plan something, your hardware is obsolete, so you should be fired.
Well, yes, that's true. I guess it takes a long time we could come in, but it's a bit different. If it's a bit different from if it hasn't been announced, it's a little bit different from where it's actually announced and being used for something. I hope you agree.
So let's agree to disagree because I don't think we're going to see eye to eye on that. My question, though, was what's being done to make sure that people aren't stockpiling so that they abuse this intra-RIR policy? Because I see this as a problem. And I raised that on the mailing list, but I guess the ship had sailed by then.
Now, if one of the arguments that came when this intra-RIR policy was being discussed is precisely what you're asking about those who are not using the IP address. Instead of returning it, an option is there to transfer it. I guess that is actually the exact situation that the intra-RIR proposal policy came to address. So for those that have space and no longer have the need for it or are not using it, they can choose to transfer it. Now, if they are using it for something else other than they requested it for, they're in breach of the policy. However, if they choose to transfer it, that's a policy provision where they're no longer in breach. You could look at it that way. I wonder whether that answers your question. Now, on the part of what are we doing?
Yeah.
That's it. What are we doing?
So I ran an exchange point and I had somebody request that we accept certain prefixes. When I looked at these prefixes, they didn't seem to make sense. They were registered to an organization in Uganda, who I know is not the organization that is trying to connect to the internet exchange point. I tried to look up accurate WHOIS records. I even reached out to your hostmasters, who were super friendly and helpful about the whole problem. We turned out that the organization in Uganda had just given the address space to a broker. Well, had called up a broker and said, dear broker, you can use this address space and sell it for us. And the broker had done exactly that. And this FTTH ISP that I was dealing with at the time had gone to the broker, got the address space, and was using it in not quite what I would call a legal manner, according to how I understand the Afrinic policies. So my question was, a simple trace route from Afrinic would fix that. Now, I understand that you don't have, it's not practical to do that for addresses, but do you have a policy or do you have internal guidelines, an internal process, if you want, for investigating these cases of fraud? What are the guidelines that I guess folks here should be looking at?
Well, I will try not to answer that in detail, but one, there are processes that allow us to actually investigate. The RSA has a provision for that in Section 4C. If there's a reason for us to investigate or if anything causes an investigation to take place, we can do it. So we are allowed to do that. And the members who sign the contract know that they can sign against or what they have signed against. It's very clear that we can investigate them anytime. So if, for example, you, Nishal, detect some sort of fraudulent activity somewhere, nothing stops you from contacting us, and we'll go ahead and find out more. There is a proposal that has been going through the PDP a couple of cycles that further puts in place more mechanisms to investigate. But in my mind, that proposal just goes ahead to stress what the RSA is already stressing about us being able to investigate some of these. And I believe the RS team, I'm not sure whether what stats they are on their side. I believe there are a couple of cases they are investigated a couple of times. However, going out to proactively investigate and find out who is in breach, I don't believe we've been doing that. I think we can investigate on a case-by-case basis as reported.
Okay, fair enough. The lines disappeared, so I have a few more. Do you have statistics on the number of times you've revoked member accounts for renting out space illegally? Sorry, I missed the Afrinic update yesterday. I was in a different meeting, so if that was presented there, I apologize.
I do not believe we have revoked any member on the basis of renting space illegally. However, Alan, I don't know, I don't believe we have revoked any yet, unless Alan has any update on that. But I don't think we have.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever revoked space for breach of policy, although we do have the right to. Usually what happens when we become aware of a breach of policy is we give the member the opportunity to correct the problem.
Still no line, so it's me. How do I check? So now I'm in a situation where I've been contacted by a broker. It's taking me way too long to get address space from Afrinic. How do I check to make sure that this person's actually allowed to rent or lease that space to me? So the example that I gave you, for example, the organization in Uganda that was trying to lend out space, the thing that I'd missed that the postmasters pointed out quite quickly to me was that this was a legacy block. And it was okay for them to have done this, and Afrinic wasn't really in a position to act on that. But what guidelines do you give to the folks sitting here who may need to or may want to be able to look at the space? Do you have a mark in WHOIS that says legacy record, ignore this? Or I think at some point you used to have a ZZZ, and you would know this better than I do.
Yes, well, yeah, the WHOIS is your first, is your first place to run to. I do believe that legacy resources must be having that status in there that says legacy. And two, you could look at the registration date. I do believe that the object in WHOIS has a date on it that shows about when it was registered, and might have further dates below that depict the various changes or modifications of that object. But the first date or the only date there would be the date of original registration. So most dates in the, say, 90s, I think, according to our processes, the wish Madhu was correct me on that, but I think if it is 1998 and below, then that would qualify to be a legacy block. And if in doubt, as usual, please just fire us an email and we'll clarify that to you.
Okay. Again, yes. I'd like to say thank
you
to the
host. If the
master.
block is not legacy, and you're sure that this is an LIR who is relatively new, it's a new company, you know them, and they have acquired it under the RSA and policies, then they should not be leasing it. But still, again, in doubt, just fire us an email and we'll guide you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody just heard was on the queue, but they went back. But thank you, Nisha. Yes. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.